This is Coach Spongebob, and in the Great Snail Race, we see Spongebob becoming the villain in this episode by how he physically and emotionally manipulates his pet snail Gary. We all know Spongebob is happy most of the time, but today we will reveal the toxic side of Spongebob as we uncover the true meaning in this video. The episode starts with Squidward getting a package at his front door, and we can see how excited Squidward is until the delivery guy says his last name wrong.
Thank you, Mr. Tennis Balls.
That's tentacles.
Anyway, Squidward walks out of his house with his new pet snail named Snelly and runs into SpongeBob, Patrick, and Gary. SpongeBob says how Gary and Snelly can play together, but Squidward disagrees, saying that Snelly has to practice for the Great Snail Race, and tells SpongeBob that Gary can't compete because he's a mutt. He even shows a certificate for his pet snail. This leads to SpongeBob telling Patrick this.
You know what? I'm starting to get the idea that Squidward thinks his snail is better than mine.
No.
SpongeBob gets so angry at Squidward for saying Snelly is a better snail than Gary, that he becomes Gary's coach to train him for the race. He also says this to Gary as his coach.
Looks like we're gonna start our training now, ladies.
As you can tell, SpongeBob is already turning into the villain of the story. After making a protein shake made out of kelp, raw eggs, and nails, yes, you heard that right, he's making Gary eat nails to make him stronger. Anyway, SpongeBob pushes Gary through a series of drills to compete against Squidward's pet snail in the upcoming race to prove Gary is the superior snail. Meanwhile, Patrick is training his pet rock.
My snail.
Patrick, that's a rock.
Yeah, thanks, I know. He's got nerves of steel.
Okay, besides that, Gary is pushed to his absolute limits, even though all he wants to do is watch his TV. But SpongeBob is forcing Gary to train anyway. You can already see a change in behavior for SpongeBob. In some ways, SpongeBob is right to get Gary out of the house, because if you want to become successful at something, you have to focus on the goal. But at the same time, SpongeBob pushes Gary towards his own goal without understanding that Gary doesn't care about the competition. More on this later in the video. I think SpongeBob is pushing Gary so hard because he cares too much about his image if they were to lose the race, and also because Squidward made fun of him.
That mongrel of yours doesn't have a chance against Snelly.
It becomes less about what Gary wants and more about bragging rights for SpongeBob. As SpongeBob is heading to the race, we can see Gary looking destroyed. He gets to the starting line right next to Snelly, and you can see how tired he looks. SpongeBob even gives Gary a pep talk as if that would help him, saying how they need to beat Squidward and win the race.
Now get out there and win so we can rub Squidward's big fat nose in it.
I don't know about you, but SpongeBob pushed Gary way too much in this episode. If Gary wanted to compete in the race, he would like to. Not for validation purposes, but because he would like to feel better about himself through achievement. This would be a positive way to deal with competition. It can be motivating to push ourselves to become better because it gives us a reason to show off our greatest strengths. The problem is when it is not about the process of the game, but rather the idea of not being good enough. SpongeBob forgets that at the end of the day, it is just a game. If he loved Gary, he wouldn't have trained him and forced him to compete in the race. The question then becomes, what makes SpongeBob feel as if he's not good enough? I think this idea can be related to our own lives. When will you be at a point in your life where you are satisfied, where you can finally take a step back and experience life to its fullest, and look in the mirror and accept yourself for who you are, rather than always fighting to be better? For me, I believe that there's no moment where you are completely satisfied with your life. And that's okay. The reason I say this is because there's always a problem that will come up in life. There's always a need for change. We are all pushing ourselves to become better in one way or another. And this goes for even the most successful people on earth. But when it gets to a point in life where you start to focus on the bad things about yourself, this is when self-development becomes toxic. When it's more about fixing things you hate about yourself rather than accepting yourself for who you are as you are. When self-development becomes toxic like this, sometimes the best option is to stop altogether. Since SpongeBob doesn't realize he needs to stop, by the time the race starts, Gary doesn't even move an inch. SpongeBob notices this and starts yelling at Gary to move. On the other hand, we see Patrick comforting his pet rock while at the same time going easy on it and not stressing it out, even though it's not alive. After SpongeBob's yap session, Gary finally starts moving towards the finish line and is panting the whole way.
I do not like the look of this.
Even the host is saying that SpongeBob is putting too much pressure on Gary.
That coach is pushing that snail too hard. Faster, Gary!
Out of nowhere, Gary's eyes start to swell up and explode, and the crowd along with SpongeBob are in shock. After that, his whole shell explodes, causing Gary to swerve and crash into a bundle of tires.
He's heading straight for the wall!
At this point, SpongeBob is realizing he messed up big time.
Oh, Gary, I'm sorry. Gary!
He admits he was training Gary way too much, while also crying on the track, causing Snelly to come back for Gary to comfort him. In the end, we can see Patrick's pet rock finish the race. I'm not exactly sure how the rock managed to finish the race, but this is a kid show at the end of the day. Sometimes it's best to go at your own pace in life, just like the rock. Self-development, as shown in this episode, needs to have a balance. Always taking action and working towards a goal 24/7 can be extremely exhausting, causing burnout, which in turn makes you less productive overall. It's okay to take a break from your goals once in a while, to take a step back and enjoy life. But I don't think using the excuse of burnout to not push yourself is necessarily healthy. Like I said, having a balance in life and just in general is the best option. Strive to become better, not perfect. This may seem familiar in your own life, how it sometimes feels like people are pushing you towards a goal of their own, rather than understanding what your actual goals are. This is seen throughout the episode because we were shown early on that Gary didn't want to race in the first place, but Spongebob did.
Patrick, Gary and I've got some serious work to do.
You can run, but you can't hide, SquarePants!
It feels as if they want you to achieve something that they couldn't achieve in their lifetime, so they put that pressure on you in hopes of living vicariously through you. Sometimes, speaking up for yourself doesn't work anyway, just like how Gary was telling Spongebob that he was not listening to him.
Oh, Gary, why didn't you tell me I wasn't listening? You did?
Gary was trying his best to communicate with Spongebob during his training. We can see how lonely Gary must have felt during this situation. Speaking of feeling alone, make sure to check out the loneliest episode of Spongebob, where we cover what happens in our loneliest moments through the eyes of Squidward, as he escapes death itself. See you later.